Welcome back to another episode of the Higher Ed Podcast. I'm your host, Kamar D. Jarnett. I'm flying solo today. Got a great, important guest with us today. Dr. Jason Altmire is here, and I appreciate your time, my friend. Could you introduce yourself to the audience? Maybe give them a little bit of your origin story?
Sure. Thank you, Kamar, for having me. I am Jason Altmire. I am the CEO of Career Education Colleges and Universities. We are the national association that represents private post-secondary career schools. We have about 800 campuses across America among our membership. And when you think of career schools that are, the grade and technical schools that you hear about. So welders, truck drivers, HVAC, auto and aviation technicians, nurses, allied health professionals, cosmetology, culinary, everything under the sun related to career education. So that's who we represent. Prior to this, I have been in business as an executive for two very large healthcare companies, and I also served 3 terms in the U.S. Congress in between those 2 stints. So I have a lot of experience with these issues related to higher ed as well as on the employer side.
Wow. So government and higher ed. Okay. All right. So I interviewed a person a couple weeks ago, and it was from Wall Street to higher ed. Would you say that government and higher ed are a little bit more closely linked, or are these kind of really far apart as well?
I wouldn't say they're far apart. Of course, higher ed relies upon the government quite a bit, which we are seeing now related to the Trump administration tightening their purse strings with related to funding of higher education in a variety of ways. But when you look at student loans, Pell grants, and of course, research grants, and all the ways that the government impacts higher education, that plays a very significant role. So I was on the education subcommittee in Congress and the higher education subcommittee, and learned a lot about the issues and worked with institutions in that regard. And now on the other side, working in Washington with some of those same entities, but also representing our schools and working with accreditors and employers and other stakeholders. So there's a lot happening in, especially in the career sector. It's very, very important. There's a skills gap that exists. We hear all the time that employers can't find the workers to fill jobs that are in demand today. And I listed for you some of the programs that we have. Those are the jobs that are the highest demand right now. So we're very excited to work with policymakers and employers and accreditors and everybody else to help expand that pipeline and get more people into those jobs.
Absolutely. When did you first fall in love with higher education?
I've always liked higher education. I was also a staffer very early in my career in the early 1990s. I've been doing this kind of work for 35 years now, and was a staffer for a different congressman that was served on the education committee. And I always wanted to kind of go in the direction of higher education. One of the told you roles I had earlier was the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. So that was both healthcare and education related. And when I was in Congress, I wanted to make sure I got on the education committee and worked with institutions and stakeholders. So it's always been something I've been very interested in because I think it's critically important for the country.
Absolutely. How would you say that your unique experience, government, working at colleges, kind of, prepares you or gives you insight into your current role?
What gives me the most insight is I have traveled around the country and visited well over 100 career schools. I told you we have 800 campuses, and I've been every corner from Miami to Seattle, from New England to San Diego, and
Sure.
all in between. And nothing is a better indicator of the work and value of our schools than when you visit them firsthand and you see those students, many of which are non-traditional students, people who are going through hard times, maybe single moms, veterans returning from the workforce, people who've been downsized in their career or just in transition, whatever it might be. And our schools give them a chance. Often first generation students haven't had somebody in their family pursue higher education, and sometimes it's their last chance. Sometimes they have tried other settings and it hasn't worked out. And it's exhilarating to see the work that our schools do. When you go to one of these graduation ceremonies in particular, and you see the face of the students and the family members that are there to cheer them on. If you go to a traditional higher education graduate, you'll hear parents yelling, "That's my kid, that's my daughter, that's my son." You go to one of our graduation, people from the audience say, "That's my mom, that's my dad, that's my sister," because these are adults in many cases. So when you see the impact that you're having on the lives of real people that are struggling and had to work really hard to get that certificate, that credential, that degree, it's very rewarding for me.
Absolutely. So when you think about the current state of higher ed, how do you think about that? Is it positive? What do you think the trajectory is? How do you see it?
I think there's a sea change that has occurred in understanding that career programs are where a lot of the jobs are going to be moving forward in the future. And it's become cool to go into the skilled trades. It used to be that career and technical programs, unfortunately, were considered to be the lesser path. If you can't get into a 4-year school, or for whatever reason you're not interested in that path, you could take the VOTech in high school. You could take the career program, and thankfully we have moved on from that as a country, and we recognize that it is incredibly valuable to pursue career and technical education, to pursue a path in a trade or a career school. And that is every day in the news, multiple times, both on TV, newspapers around the country, talking about the growth, the explosion of interest in the skilled trades, driven in large part by employers, talking about how important it is that we find the workers to do these jobs. And we spend a lot of time politically talking about rebuilding America, bringing manufacturing back to America, all of these ideas. They need workers, and those are our workers. I always use the example: if you are sitting on an airplane and you're looking at those men and women around you who are working on that plane, you want two things. You want them to be really good at what they do, and
Sure.
you want there to be a lot of them. And those are our students. Those are our graduates. And that's just one example. It applies to any of the construction trades, heavy equipment, the linemen that are always responding across state lines when there's a hurricane or some sort of natural disaster that knocks out the power. I'm just so proud of the work that our schools do, and the graduates that are successful in transforming America and rebuilding America all across the country.
Absolutely. You touched on a myriad of great points just now. One of the things we've been talking about on, I would say, the last 2 weeks that I've been recording is I did an interview with a Dr. Irma Becerra. She's a president at Marymount University. And what she was talking about, or kind of unpacking, is that recently, it seems like, socially, or, just kind of around the country, there's been kind of a thought that education has to kind of prove its value. Whereas at one point it was just always assumed you go to high school, you go to college, right? And, maybe a lot of this was brought on by COVID and things of that nature. And one of the great quotes she had, she said, if education isn't for everyone, if that's what you're saying, then please show me the person that doesn't need education. And just kind of hearing you speak on, value, and just being able to look around you on a plane. I guess number one, how do you kind of unpack what's going on socially in terms of, it's somewhat being, a shift in terms of the country thinking that education has to prove its value, but then knowing, like she said, that I can't figure out a person that doesn't need education. So what are we talking about?
I'm glad to hear her say that, because there has been a little bit of pushback from traditional education, from the growth of interest in the skilled trades.
Yep.
And again, thankfully, we're moving on from that in a lot of ways. And I think value is a critically important topic. A lot of organizations have looked at the return on investment because taxpayers, in many cases, fund the students' higher
Absolutely.
education pursuit. And our students in particular come from lower income and disadvantaged backgrounds in many cases, and they do rely upon student loans and grants, and the federal taxpayers involved in that. When you look at community colleges and public universities, they get enormous taxpayer subsidies, often through the state level, but those
Sure.
are still taxpayers using public funds to support the educational pursuits of students. And I think that being the case, it's really important to look at what is the return on investment? Is it, or is there a job on the other end of this? If you go to a big state university and you take up a major, I mean, I don't want to pick on anybody, but let's say anthropology or drama or, you know, any, it's
Yep.
of the philosophy, whatever, what is you can do that. That's fine. You've got to do anything that you want, pursue any direction and career that you want. But what is the role of the taxpayer in funding that student's educational experience? And if there's not going to be a job in that student's chosen field of study on the other end of that, or at least not a job that pays for the cost of that education, I think that's a really important consideration. And we do support accountability across all institutions in higher education. So if you're going to apply a measure, let's say looking at graduation rates,
Sure.
at completion rates, job placement rates, or the type of income that that student makes after they graduate, that's fine, and we support that, but just apply it to all schools in all sectors, because the taxpayer has a right that all schools across higher education are educating and training students for jobs that are necessary and jobs that are going to be here in the future, not for jobs that either aren't there at all or were here in the past.
No, absolutely. And I think it is something to be said in terms of value when, the parent, the students, the family, know, hey, we're making this investment, but the people that go to this school, they become cooks. The people that go to this school, they become dental hygienists, right? I think there's something when you can kind of see that immediate, tangible return. It does help in making, the person that's making that investment kind of know what they're doing it for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about AI, but when you think about the jobs in the future and displacements that may occur because of technology like AI, but other things that are coming too, there's always a transition that occurs in society of the type of jobs that are needed. And again, if you look at a list of the highest growth jobs, the highest growth employment opportunities now and into the future, very many of those are in the skilled trades.
Sure, absolutely. So, just a little bit, do you think it was COVID that kind of helped ushered in kind of that, renaissance, if you will, of the trades and the career colleges and kind of that enrollment growing and it becoming a little bit more cooler, sexier?
There's a couple of things that COVID did. One was, of course, it changed the economic circumstances for a lot of individuals and families,
For sure.
business, everything. And usually, history has shown when there's an economic downturn, people do look at the trades for potential career opportunities because maybe they've lost their white collar job and they just want to transition. And the trades, again, generally are, you can depend on them growing as far as the opportunity. But another thing that it did was it changed people's perception of distance learning, of online education. It used to be before COVID, people weren't used to what we all know as Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and you weren't used to this virtual environment where you can have a conversation or a quality education experience, or even in a business setting in a virtual environment online. Well, now I think people have a much greater appreciation for the distance learning experience and don't view an online education as something that is substandard or out of the ordinary. I think we all see it in our daily lives, and I think there's a better appreciation for those types of programs. It might be in a hybrid environment or giving an online education. But of course, for a lot of the skilled trades that we've been talking about, those are hands-on professions. And if you want to become a welder, there are ways you can use an Oculus and you can do some distance learning for practice, but there is nothing that substitutes from being there and using your hands and doing the work right in front of you. So from that perspective, that's always going to be an important part of the education experience.
Absolutely. What do you think, higher ed and definitely the schools under your umbrella, what do they have to do to kind of continue this renaissance, right? How do you drive it? How do you make it, not only stay in vogue, but continue to become even more in vogue?
I've been gratified because of the understanding of the importance of the skilled trades that we've talked about, that uh, it has changed the perception of those careers. And one of the things that has irritated our members from the public policy perspective is some politically have a disagreement with or lack of appreciation for certainly an outdated perception of for-profit institutions. And the majority of our members, private post-secondary career schools, not all of them, but the vast majority are for-profit schools. And when you look at the data, because people, often on the Democratic side of the aisle, have a concern about for-profit involvement in higher education generally. And as it relates to career schools, if you look at the data, what it shows is the for-profit career schools are disproportionately the best schools. If you look at return on investment, as indicated by Georgetown Center for Education in the Workforce,
Sure.
they put out a study listing 4,600 schools across the country, all of them under their umbrella, 4,600 schools, and they ranked them from top to bottom by return on investment. What is the student's experience after completing that program? Are they getting value from the money that was put into it, often by the taxpayer? And for-profit schools are disproportionately at the top. Best schools in the country for return on investment, disproportionately. The USA Today recently put out the top 250 trade schools in the country, ranked by completion rates, by postgraduate success, by the ability of students to have social mobility, to move up on the economic ladder after their education. And 41% of the 250 best schools were for-profit schools. And
Wow.
the American Council on Education ranks with Carnegie endowments the best schools in the country based upon those two factors: academic success, quality of the program, but also social mobility, moving students up. And disproportionately for-profit schools. For-profit schools have a greater percentage of people in the highest category than any other type of school, than nonprofit or public school. So it's an irritant to us when politicians at any level of government criticize for-profit schools kind of blindly and casting the blanket across all types of schools. There was an effort in Congress to exclude from the short-term Pell Grant that was passed as part of what they called the Big Beautiful Bill, the budget reconciliation bill that President Trump signed. That included a short-term Pell Grant that students can use to pursue certificate and career and trade school programs like we're talking about. And there were some on the Democratic side that worked really hard to exclude for-profit schools. Why on earth would you exclude 41% of the top 250 schools in the country. Why on earth would you exclude the schools that have the highest percentage of being the best
Right.
social mobility and student outcomes, only for a political reason? So that is something that is of great concern to us, is this outdated view of for-profit schools because of things that have happened outside the career education sector and things that have happened in the past. So thankfully, we seem to be moving in a different direction away from that perception.
Thankfully, indeed. So, do you think that the adult learner, or maybe I should ask this differently, do you think that the traditional student that's going from high school straight into college is starting to think about higher ed more like the adult learner now?
I think in part, yeah, I think people understand that there's different paths and different careers, and you can be successful and have value and make a life sustaining and family sustaining wage if you take the career path. And that's not for everybody, but for the
Right.
people for whom it is for, they now have a greater opportunity and a greater appreciation from society and in the educational system of the value of that type of education.
Yeah, and it's almost just even thinking about a couple of the points that you just brought up. You wouldn't want it to be harder for the adult learner to invest in college. You would think you would want to make it easier or at least the same for a person that maybe, have a family, maybe working one or two jobs, but still trying to figure out a way to get into a different career. You wouldn't want to put obstacles in their way.
And that's why our schools have been successful. It's because of that flexibility based upon an individual's circumstances. As you said, often they are working another job or maybe two or even three.
Yeah.
They're juggling childcare. They have other responsibilities in their life. And we offer the flexibility with night and weekend programs and the ability of students to choose the path, the circumstances, the setting that is most appropriate for them, given the challenges that they're facing in their own lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was working at a school in Ohio and we had start day and had a kid that was well, an adult, but a lot of times we call them kids because they're taking classes. He was coming to class, but he had his daughter. And he comes on campus and he's got his daughter with him. And of course we can't send him to class. And he's like, Mr. Kamar, I want to go to school. He was like, but I found this babysitter on Craigslist. He was like, I got to the door. I just couldn't leave my daughter there, right? And we're looking like we want to watch the daughter, but we know that we can't, but we're just sitting here like, man, this guy really wants to come. He's even here. And we were wishing that we had a little bit more flexibility with the schedule to accommodate him. So I understand exactly what you mean in terms of flexibility and just trying to make it as easy as you can because there's already obstacles and barriers, but trying to help that person get into that new career, that next career.
Yeah, in addition to finding the financial
Yep.
ability to pay for your education. So making it as easy for disadvantaged students in
Yep.
particular to be able to afford and have the flexibility to pursue that education.
Absolutely. So let's talk about AI a little bit. You alluded to it earlier. It's the rave pretty much. You're watching MSNBC, everything is Chat GPT and Google AI and Meta. Do you think it's impacting higher ed yet? And just how do you think about it in terms of how it will impact higher ed?
Affecting higher ed, it's affecting all aspects of society. In relation to higher ed, 2 or 3 years ago, when Chat GPT and AI first kind of came onto the scene and the public became aware of it, the first concern everybody had was cheating. Students using it to write their papers and submit work that wasn't their own original authorship and so forth. But I think people pretty quickly realized that, of course, you want to prevent that, but
Right.
it was a way to use AI effectively to assist in all aspects of higher education, to assist the professor in designing the course, in carrying out the course in all kind of ways, to assist admissions professionals in doing their work, sifting through the applications and judging students and applicants based upon whatever criteria they want to
Sure.
apply, in managing the business of operating an institution of higher education, regardless of their ownership or tax status. It's all kind of ways that higher education is impacted by it, and the same with society generally. But you hear a lot of talk about displacement and jobs that are going to be lost. And I do
Sure.
think there's a consideration to be made related to what types of programs are educating and training students and sending them in the direction of fields that the opportunity will be very limited because of the coming growth of AI. And if you are a paralegal, or you're a research assistant, or somebody who's writing, assisting somebody with the design of paperwork and projects and writing reports. I mean, that those jobs are likely to be displaced. But that doesn't mean there will be fewer jobs.
Right.
It just means there will be different jobs. The opportunity for AI is if you understand how to use it, you're a programmer and all of these other opportunities, that's where the future will go. So I've learned recently, as I shared those same concerns as everybody else, but I've learned recently that it actually doesn't mean there will be fewer jobs for people. It just means there will be different jobs.
Absolutely.
And as it relates to the type of student we've been talking about, we are career schools, the trade schools that you think of, again, the skilled trades, the healthcare programs. When you look at these enormous data centers that are being built to power AI all across North America and other places, but in our reach, North America, the multi-billion-dollar projects, involving thousands of workers all across in regions all across the country. And I have met with some of the folks who were building and designing and planning those type of data centers, and they cannot find the workers, and they want to work with us to find electricians and plumbers and welders and truck drivers and HVAC techs and all the rest.
Yep.
To build those facilities. So for us, it's an opportunity, and the type of jobs that we are educating and training students to pursue are not going to be eliminated by AI. When you are a welder and you're hanging upside down backwards using a mirror on a bridge to weld behind you,
Right.
there's no scenario where AI is going to take your job. I listed all the rest. So, there may be some like truck driving, you hear about automated vehicles and so forth. There may need to be an adoption, but for the most part, AI is not going to displace trade school graduates, and it's actually going to create, through the operations and data centers, it's going to create thousands of new jobs. So we're very excited about the onset of AI.
That's a great point. Like somebody, because I watched this show called The Gilded Age, and you see the kind of the horses and buggies. I think it's set in like 1880-ish, and someone was speaking, and they were talking about how literally almost in a blink of an eye, we went from horses and carriages to the car. And all of those jobs may have went away that pertain to the horse and carriage, but so many different other jobs came from the automobile. So it seems like you hit on it perfectly in terms of some jobs maybe just be displaced, but it's definitely going to open up different opportunities. And I think career colleges have an opportunity to really once again continue to have programs that are in demand. People can get in there, get the training they need, and get out and start earning money, contributing to society, and earning money for their family. So I think you hit that perfectly.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Gilded Age, because I recently heard an example, a couple examples. What you were saying is when automobiles first started to come on the scene and become more popular, and you would see them around, there was kind of this push and pull between people who benefited from horses, the use of horses. And as an example, today you see a gas station on every corner. It used to be you would see people who had horse feed and hay
Yep.
on every corner.
Yep, absolutely.
Stop. And so then there was a transition to
Right.
moving them out and putting in gas stations. In the late 1800s, there were people who were literally paid to walk the streets and turn on the candles.
Yep.
Every night. And when electricity came into being, there was actually a lobbying effort on behalf of the people who represented the workers,
Yep.
benefited from the use of candles and kerosene and powering things through
Right.
lit flame, versus now, thanks to Thomas Edison and others,
Right.
had this new invention of the light bulb and all that would become. So there's always going to be a transition that occurs, and people who were displaced because of new technology. And as I said, with AI, it certainly doesn't mean fewer jobs. It just means different jobs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's been great having you. I want to wrap it up here, but this is a question we always ask. And it used to be, what does higher ed look like 5 to 10 years? But with AI and the singularity approaching, we have to ask now, what do you think higher ed looks like in the next 2 to 3 years? Because things are changing so rapidly.
2 to 3 years is a short period of time. I mean, I would say you look out to the future, and it's all of these things that we have been talking about. The two most important is the growth of skilled trades, trade school, career and technical education. I think you're seeing an explosion across the country, greater understanding that those are jobs that are needed. There are vacancies, and we need more people to pursue those, and people can make a life-sustaining wage. So you're going to continue to see that growth. And as it relates to AI and other technologies, you're going to see an explosion of the use of those type of ways to enhance the educational experience, to supplement the work of instructors, and do more than just prevent cheating. It's going to be about using AI to assist admissions professionals, professors, administrators in a way that I think people have been slow to envision. But you look several years out from this, I think people will understand the power of that tool that will be at their disposal.
Absolutely. I think I was watching, what was it, the All In podcast, and they were saying, I think it was a Bill Gates quote. He said, things don't change as much as you think they will in 2 to 3 years, but in 8 to 10 years, they change way more than you can ever imagine.
Yep, that's exactly it. And you can't predict the future, but you can prepare for it. And I think across
Absolutely.
higher education, that's what's happening right now.
Absolutely. I can't think of a better place to end it than right there. Once again, I appreciate you, Dr. Altmire, for squeezing some time out for us. You want to let the audience know where they can find you: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook.
If you go to career.org, that will take you to our association. Any stats, facts, figures, data that you need to look at how career education schools perform, especially how for-profit schools perform against other types of schools. Career.org. You can find me on there. And if you just want to learn about me as a person, if you search my name, a whole bunch of stuff will come up, including my website, jasonaltmire.com. So I invite anyone to reach me through any of those two ways, and we can continue the conversation.
Absolutely. All right. Always a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day, my friend, and I'll be in touch. Take care. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Lamar. Good talking to you.
Absolutely.